What happens if you cross a horde survival game with a roguelike deck builder in a turn-based setting? Well, you'll get something like Hexblast, which sees you play as a robot placed in the centre of a hexagonal grid, and you can't move, and the enemies are coming to get you. And you'll need to use your deck of cards, of attacks, or whatever else you've got in your arsenal to try and survive 60 waves of enemies. It's tricky, there's 4 different types of robots and they all play very differently, but Hexblast presents its ideas and gameplay loop in a really fascinating, no-frills way that allows you to just focus on purely what is the best tactical move for you in hopes that you'll be able to survive for a little bit longer. A game of Hexblast starts off with you picking your robot and it being placed into the centre of the screen. And each wave is a turn in the game, and each wave brings new enemies, and they'll start at the perimeter of the map. A turn consists of you spending your stamina points, and you'll see that in the green box on the left hand side. Traditionally 3, but you can boost that up through upgrades across your run that don't carry over from run to run. And each card at the bottom of your screen will also have a green box signifying the amount of stamina that it will take to play. Some of those cards will be attacks, and you'll see the attack pattern demonstrated on the card and the amount of damage that it will give. And then some will be more status ailment attacks, or it might be that because each robot comes with its own unique gimmick, it will be playing that gimmick into the map. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But the idea is that you spend out all of your energy and then you'll trigger the next wave, which brings more enemies on, and hopefully you'll have cleared enough enemies to kind of keep up with the momentum of the ever oncoming horde coming to get you. If the enemies reach the centre of the screen, they'll start attacking you and you have 30 health, and while some of your cards do have shields that can help stave off some damage, that health won't last long because increasingly as you go throughout the game, enemies get faster with more health. They sometimes come with shields, sometimes they'll transport and arrive somewhere else on the map every time that they've been hit, and so you really have to play to what is the biggest threat on the map and how can you get rid of it by maximising the amount of efficiency that you can get from the attack patterns and the cards that you've got at the bottom of the screen. As you do this, you'll be collecting XP from the amount of enemies that you kill, and that then translates into shops that can be unlocked in between levelling up. And this allows you to either buy new cards that can be added into your deck. You can pay money to discount cards, and that money is kind of the XP that you're earning, or you can pay to level up your cards as well. And so a level 1 card might do 6 damage or 10 damage, a level 2 might do 15 damage, a level 3 might do 20, and they'll cost a lot. But obviously this will start to become really important over time when you're really juggling amount of stamina and moves you've got versus the amount of enemies coming at you. And so you need to boost up your cards as best as possible. One of my favourite features about Hexblast is that it plays a little bit like a tactical version of the board game Blokus, because each of the attacks can be rotated around, and quite often there's a very specific way how you can play some of these cards that means that like you get an extra damage boost if you hit 2 or less enemies or 3 or more, or it might be a perimeter blast that then only affects the outer perimeter, and so if you've got lots of new enemies that arrive there, it can be incredibly powerful to use, but they're kind of gimmicky for very specific situations, but you want to have those cards about because you're thinking they'll be really useful for specific situations. What you can also do is choose to forfeit some of your stamina points, and if you do that and end a turn early, that will convert to power and strength for your next turn, which then adds on another 1 or 2 hit points depending on how many energy stamina points you've kind of carried over, and that can then boost you up to then, if an enemy's got 12 points and all of your attacks do 10 damage, suddenly you're in a great game to get rid of enemies in 1 move rather than 2. The other really cool thing about Hexblast is this: different bots have different abilities and their card decks are very different. One focuses purely on lots of different attacks where if you make sure that you only hurt a certain amount of enemies, then it will do specific damage. Another one deals with earthquakes and pollution. And what it does is it lays down these yellow tiles everywhere, which will then cause like aftershock damage for any enemies that move onto them for a certain period of turns. But what that does is cause pollution cards to fill your deck, which you then kind of beef out your deck and you have to try and discard and get rid of them. And that's very difficult to do, especially if you get some really bad cards that just mean that loads of your hand are pollution cards. So it leaves you kind of shortchanged and struggling to survive. Another robot poisons and spreads rot across the map. And so this is about trying to get in damage early and then making sure that they're kind of withered away over time before they can get to you. But you don't have any direct damage that you can cause. And again, the gameplay is entirely different with these new cards and decks and gimmicks. And across the 4 different bots, none of them play the same. You have to really change up the way how you approach Hexblast. And that is one of the biggest compliments that I can give for these types of games, where sometimes it feels quite surface level what's changed. Fundamentally, this feels like 4 very different tactical games that you're playing because the bots handle incredibly differently, and that's high praise. The last game mechanic that carries across all of the gameplay is that you can also get chips, which you can then put into your robot that you're trying to keep alive. And these they're called overclocked chips, but they'll boost up some of your base stats. So for example, it might increase the percentage of chance that you might get a critical attack on, or if something's poisoned, it will then decrease its poison by only 25% per turn rather than 50%. And so there's lots of different chips that you can get access to. They cost a lot of coins though, and so you're going to have to really choose, do you want a chip or do you want to upgrade maybe 2 cards instead? And that's kind of the trade-off you've got. I've had great fun playing Hexblast. It is hard, I will give that straight away for free, because I'm only on difficulty level 1 and 2 with all of the different bots that I've been playing with, and I can't get much further because it keeps out-tactifying me. And so you kind of get overwhelmed very quickly if you make a few wrong errors. What I will say is that you can be railroaded into really poor decks, and sometimes you hold on to cards that you don't want to pay to get rid of, but some of the best cards are ones that start off weak and cumulatively grow over the course of a run by either gaining more damage every time you use it or having really big upgrades that can then chain together. So for example, it could be that you're placing down an earthquake card so that when then enemies go on top of it, you've got an upgraded damage card that then does double damage for anyone that's on top of an earthquake tile, which will then have a radius effect that will trigger a mine that will then do another blast that will then unsettle the land around that and cause damage for everything in that perimeter too. And they can kind of chain and trigger each other off, and you can get a really good ripple effect, which then means that it might then store up additional power for you, for example, that then can be added onto your next move. And so it has cumulative effects, and you have to really consciously build your deck that way to make it happen. And I would say you have to have some luck on your side too, because the upgrades and the cards that you're given whenever you level up through XP gained have to fall right for you to be able to really get the perfect run of cards, which then allows you to tackle Hexblast on anything above level 2 difficulty. In my personal opinion, at least anyway. It could be very much a skill issue. I do struggle sometimes with these games. But I've had a great blast playing Hexblast, and I would recommend this as a cheap but very enthralling roguelike deck builder that feels different and plays very differently depending on which character you decide to choose.